On chapter 18. These two chapters, they're mainly about her time in jail, but there is contradictory things in there, so FYI, okay? So we're gonna go through that. There's only 3 more chapters after the 2 I read today. So on Monday we will read the remainder, and then we can have a discussion on either Tuesday or Thursday. I think people were more up for doing Thursday because a lot of people are probably off and stuff. So I'll make a post about it and we can talk about it, okay? I seen her account did get hacked. I seen that. It got hacked, but it didn't get hacked like, thank you for the follow. It got hacked, but she technically gave him all the information because she was trying to get her blue check mark, and she got a fake email. So that was on her being smart, you know? We'll just leave it at that. That was on her being smart because her account got hacked on here. She said she was gonna delete it in a couple months anyways, so yeah. We're gonna start reading here shortly. We're gonna do 2 chapters. We're on chapter 18 right now, so we're gonna do chapter 18 and 19 today, and then the remainder 3 chapters we will read on Monday. And again, we'll either have the live panel on Tuesday or Thursday, because I know Wednesday is New Year's Day. So all right guys, we're gonna start reading so I don't have too much of a live to edit. So again, we're reading Gypsy Rose Blanchard's My Time to Stand. We're on chapter 18. We're gonna read 18 and 19 today, okay? This chapter 18 is called Who Does Not Move Forward Recedes. And again, it's in Cajun French, which I'm not looking it up anymore, but there has been one that again was not correct. I don't know. They say they're live, so they say they're accurate. I'm sorry. They say that I was reading the comments. They say that the Cajun French is different, so I just stopped looking it up, okay? Compared to Greene County Jail, Chillicothe felt like a playground. I don't know what jail feels like a playground, but okay. Chillicothe wasn't overcrowded and filthy. I was no longer alone. I lived in a pod that looked more like a dormitory, so I'm told. With the key to a door and roommates, at Chillicothe, it was actually the first time I could explore. I was freer in person than I ever had been my whole life living with my mother. I found myself frolicking in nature more than I ever could in a wheelchair, watching butterflies and slugs on volunteer weight. A patch of grass on the side of the concrete courtyard opened my imagination. I was Frulon Maria twirling on a hill. I was a Southern belle picking dandelions and fighting off Civil War suitors. I was Snow White yodeling to the forest creatures. I thought about my mother a lot, reflecting on the few happy memories from my early childhood. Outside in my prison playground, I remembered Frosty the Mardi Gras snowman and the arts and crafts we do. I'd still have frequent nightmares. One reoccurring nightmare I began to have was of me being asleep, lying on my back in my bunk in the dark, and I'd feel something on my chest. In the nightmare, I woke up to a dark figure tearing open my chest and eating my heart. When I woke up from the nightmare, I was in the same position I had been in the dream. I'd feel paralyzed and frightened with the lights off. When I'd close my eyes, the scene from the nightmare reappeared in my awake state. The demon was there. When I'd open my eyes, it would disappear. Of course there's a demon that's gonna be there, right? When I'd open my eyes, it would disappear. Life at Chillicothe had its ups and downs, points of progression and regression. I had gotten clean while in county, progress. But then the roommate I had in 2018 was still in her addiction, and upon getting her fix of Suboxone, a medicine ironically intended to treat opioid addiction, she shared it with me and I relapsed. Who knew you could get addicted to the drug that's supposed to lead you to addiction? I began to abuse Suboxone, regression. You can tell she's never really fully understood the drugs she was taking. There's definitely a pipeline in prison that makes it easy to figure out who has access to drugs. Some women got them smuggled in. Sometimes guards delivered them. Other times visitors passed them off to an inmate. All I had to say was I have money, and the dealer would find me and supply me with Suboxone. Buying and selling drugs in prison was risky, as you can get tossed in the hole, which is prison talk for segregation, which is PC talk for solitary confinement. But when you're addicted, there are no limits to what you'll do to score. Despite my addiction and shame, prison life was still an open field of eye-opening experiences. Wherever I turned, I heard and saw things I never imagined existed. I took up smoking cigarettes and heard so much profanity and horror stories of other women's lives. I saw sex in open places. Have you ever had a woman go down on you? A woman asked. I never had anything like that from anyone, was basically my answer in between nervous giggles. Wanna try? Then she told me if I let her, she'd give me her serving of biscuits and gravy. Okay. Good morning. I was no longer in contact with Nick, but once in a while Mike would update me on the details of his trial and the seriousness of his possible sentencing. Nick ultimately received life without parole, plus 25 years for armed criminal action. Hearing this made me feel similar to when I heard about my mother's cremation. I didn't love Nick anymore, but I knew the reason he was in the situation was partly because of how he felt about me. One of the many positive things about my time at Chillicothe is a mandatory class I took in 2018. The class was called Impact of Crime on Victims class, or ICVC for short. The purpose of the class is to raise awareness of the far-reaching consequences of your crime and how your actions impacted the victims. The class was extremely powerful because it was an environment where I could begin to learn to process my past, take accountability for my crime, and understand that my mother was not the only victim of the horrible decision. One of our very first assignments was to write a letter to the person we committed a crime against. While writing it, I remember all the people in our lives, my mother's siblings, our neighbors who loved and cared for us, and Nick. All people who were either blood or by choice taken in my mother's contact that hurt so many. I hadn't thought of Nick as a victim before taking this class. While he had the conscious choice to kill my mother and do so violently, he did lose his freedom and therefore his life because I was a catalyst. The letter I wrote to my mother gave me peace that no holy water could. I had found my voice and used it to offer my heart and soul to her finally. I trusted God would deliver her a message and she would forgive me for what I had done. So basically, this was a mandatory class she ended up taking. I want you guys to remember that in a little bit. This was a mandatory class she was taking. And she basically says that, in my opinion, the way that she words this is basically still saying that this was all her mother's fault. So, but remember that this was a mandatory class, guys, okay? Just remember that. So here's her letter to her mother. Mother, I am now 28 years old and in prison for my part in your murder. And although I can never justify my crime, nor can any letter or apology give back the life that was taken, I am writing this as if you were physically in front of me to express all that I have held in for my whole life. For the whole of my life. Sorry. Let me put on ambiance music because this is kind of distracting. I'm writing this letter having had nearly 5 years to feel the emotions felt when expressing the words written. Every day since your death, I have had nothing but time to reflect on the choices that have led me to where I am today. Moreover, of how your own actions formed the circumstances around mine. Again, not taking the accountability, blaming her mom. The woman writing this letter to you is far different than the girl who was once broken and desperate to live what I would later come to understand as just an average life for a young woman. Living 23 years of my life with you as my only guardian, the one person who had the responsibility of shaping who I would grow up to become, unfortunately, my upbringing was a far cry from that which it should have been. Starting from my birth, going into my young adulthood, being isolated from having any other human interaction other than with you was lonely, and has affected my ability to have appropriate social skills necessary to make healthy social interactions with others. The many unnecessary medical surgical procedures and medications that were forced on me to treat illnesses that I did not have left my body marked with scars, both physical and emotional. Your choice to not have me educated growing up has made it difficult to gain the appropriate level of education needed for a woman of my age, and has caused a depleted self-esteem in my ability to make achievements in society. When mentioning the overall lack of life experience that was withheld from me by your choice as my mother, you not only took away the normal experiences that shaped an individual to be who they are or could be, but you made the choice to keep me from the best things in life that make life worth living as a youth. The innocent joy of having a first day of school, the fun of going to the mall with friends and buying a dress that would surely never pass your approval. The excitement of being asked to prom, the comfort of your embrace when getting my heart broken for the first time. The nerves of awaiting that college acceptance letter. There are all things that I was not able to experience. It would be many years before I was able to fully understand the reasons why I grew up being isolated from others, being taken to hospital after hospital, doctor after doctor, without anything being medically wrong with me. Waiting for the next time your hand was to strike me for simply trying to make a friend. Fear, manipulation, and isolation were all I knew of your kind of love, and the lingering question of why I was unable to be allowed the one thing that everyone else seemed to have, the ability of free will. Mom, after all that has happened, I have been searching for answers and spending my time trying to learn about myself as a person, trying to make sense of why all these events unfolded with the amount of tragedy. I want you to know that I now understand that you were mentally and emotionally unstable when raising me, and that your actions were the result of a disorder called Munchausen by proxy that creates abuse inflicted on a child due to mental illness of the parent. So again, we're diagnosing Dee Dee with disorders she was never diagnosed with. With now having the answers I sought to find, I am able to finally let go of the resentment I held against you and forgive you. And moreover, I want to let you know that I'm so sorry for having a part in your death. Murder was never the answer or the solution. There is not a single day that you go unremembered, and I will carry this regret and remorse for the rest of my life. I will always love you for bringing me into the world, and will remember you with love for the woman I know was a good person behind the mental disorder that she gave her. I didn't know Gypsy was now a doctor, or Christy, or Rod. Going forward, I will take my past and turn it from pain to perseverance, advocating for children who have suffered abuse at the hands of their parent. Sharing my story with others to spread awareness of what Munchausen by proxy is and the ways people can recognize the warning signs, in the hopes that I can educate and make the next child who wonders, why is mommy doing this to me, that much braver to reach out for help. Telling a listening ear before he or she is behind bars thinking murder is the way out. I can never undergo the hurt that was caused by my actions, but I hope by doing this I am remembering you well and making a positive difference with your memory. Not in the least. I love you, Mom. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, 2018, Chillicothe Correction Center, Missouri. I felt this was so helpful. I signed up for multiple 12-week classes. I received certificates of completion, which still are valuable reminders of my search for understanding. At one point, I was taking 4 classes at one time. Learning was so much fun. It made me sad that I hadn't had a chance to be a formal student. I was able to facilitate ICVC and class called Pathways to Change. For ICVC class, I needed to be trained to teach, which was really rewarding. This is where I fell in love with the idea of mentoring others. So she thought in prison she was going to do all this. With this first letter, it made a change in her that she was going to advocate. So that she put that in her mind already, okay? So she had already put that in her mind, and she was going to, she's one of those people that has a one-track mind, okay? According to the penal system, I didn't qualify for formal psychotherapy, which was ironic, being that my first stop at Greene County was Suicide Watch. Again, you remember when she was in Greene County in the previous chapters, she was on Suicide Watch because they didn't know what ailments she actually had. So she wasn't on Suicide Watch for any other reason other than they were trying to figure out her actual medical needs and history. Now, we do know from Nadatha, who was actually one of her roommates for a short period of time, but she was in and out of Chillicothe Correctional Center. She does say that everyone qualifies for therapy. So her saying this has already been taken down, okay? I was too well for a person who was always told she wasn't ever well. This was surprising to hear. However, I was able to read books on a bunch of issues that definitely affected me. So this is important. She read books on this, guys. Codependency, PTSD, insecurity, abandonment, personality disorders, addiction, trust, and on and on. Books were a salvation. So she read books about all of these issues. So it's understandable that she's diagnosing herself, her mother, and everybody else with these issues. So it's just something that is icky to me because she was researching, in my opinion. Sadly, toward the end of my time at Chillicothe, books were banned. They were being used to traffic drugs into the prison. Knowing how much books help, labeling them contraband seemed like a drastic measure that would render itself ineffective in the long run. Where there's a will, there's a way. One very impactful course I took was on codependency. So here we say she's taking courses, but the other ones were mandatory. I read about attachment and learning why we form attachments, especially dysfunctional ones. Attachment styles usually begin with the mother. I learned that my attachment to my mother was an insecure one, so I made it my mission to please her on an off chance I would turn some of her other personalities in my favor. So there again, she's diagnosing her mother with other personalities. My self-worth was dictated by what my mother thought of me, how she reacted to my performances, and the big one, whether or not she'd hold her love. Love was dangling carrot that made me jump higher to please her, even if it meant going against what felt right. My brain had felt like a tossed salad for so long, and now insight and knowledge were available to me if I wanted them. I went on a personal quest to discover who I was without my mother, without being judged by my crime. Where other inmates saw confinement, I saw opportunity to learn independence. I even got a job as a janitor. I mopped the floors of the dining room before and after my 30-minute lunch break. I Windexed fingerprints off the plexiglass shields on the side of payphones, and I removed crumpled balls of tissue from the visitor's room. Sometimes I worked outside in the yard where I disposed of cigarette butts, fresh wads of gum, and general debris blowing around. For some, that might feel confining, but the prison yard was like a playground to me. Aside from having a job, I was responsible for my own space and had to navigate how to live with other people, how to make friends or not. Who am I? What makes me tick? I didn't know anything at all. I didn't even know what size clothing I was. because I was always dressed in some costume or boys' clothes. The only times I wore a pair of jeans that were hand-me-downs were the night I tried to run off with Dan, and then when I left the house with Nick after the murder. So you don't know what size of clothes you're wearing, but you're wearing a size of clothes while you're in prison. So you technically know what size of clothes you're wearing. You know what I mean? And then for her saying she was dressed in costumes or boys' clothes, the boys' clothes that she's referring to are literally pajama bottoms and a t-shirt. So thank you for the follow. And then this whole pair of jeans stuff is being debunked as we speak on your FYP, because yes, she's saying she wore them with Dan and Nick, but also she wore jeans as a child as well. So we're forgetting about our childhood. You're saying your childhood was very memorable and you liked the good times in your early childhood, but you failed to remember that you used to wear jeans. Got it. I don't know what shoe size I was until I bought my first pair on the day of my release from Chillicothe. You wear booties in jail, not shoes. So also, again, I just want to touch on this. Nadatha, who was in prison with Gypsy at the time at Chillicothe Correctional Center, she has confirmed that you are given a pair of boots at Chillicothe and your size is right on the bottom. So you knew exactly what size you were wearing the whole entire time you were in prison. The same with your outfit. If you're in prison and you're wearing a small, that's probably what size you wear, is a small. After a lifetime of spending some of my days sitting around watching television, waiting for doctor's appointments or an errand to run, my routine at Chillicothe initially made me feel busy. As much as I was not a morning person, I liked having somewhere to be, even when somewhere was absolutely nowhere. All that mattered was living out my day with nobody holding my hand. Without my mother's restriction, my days felt fuller and freer. The one thing that was similar to the life I lived with my mother was living by a schedule, except my mother's schedule was set by a timer for medication dosage, but in a way that familiarity helped with the transition. 7:30 a.m. Count time. We sat up in our bunks and turned the lights on. Corrections officers, COs for short, accounted for all inmates. This took about 15 to 20 minutes after which I went back to sleep. 10:30 a.m., got down from my top bunk, clicked on my TV, made a cup of instant coffee. With my coffee in hand, I headed to the day room. Sometimes I'd make phone calls, but they were really short before I earned time and privileges. Then I'd go back to my room, look at my locker, pick from the canteen items, mac and cheese, or some other processed packaged food like ramen, and go back to the day room. 1:30 to 3 p.m., we'd have recreation time. I liked to work out on the elliptical machine for about an hour. I'd come back to the housing unit, shower. By the time I was out and dressed, it was around 3 p.m. 3 p.m., I went to work. I took out the trash, swept and mopped, changed toilet paper rolls, and so on. 4:30 p.m., count time again. We returned to our rooms and sat on our bunks until COs finished. 5 to 10 p.m., free time for phone use or other things like reading or playing games or studying. I was able to get my GED while at Chillicothe. 10 p.m., count time and time for bed. How do you go about figuring out who you are when you spent your whole life unconsciously playing pretend? Like everyone else doing life, I had to cycle through a ton of growing phases, trial and error over and over. In many ways, I went through adolescence in prison, and since prison is like a grown-up high school, women in their 40s act like they're 16. That's due to their parents not actually caring for them, and also drug use and homelessness and all of that stuff. So just an FYI, not all women act like that. The environment was perfect. When I first got there, I joined a clique and I tried to be one of the mean girls. I took on a new nickname, Jersey, because I acted like my shit don't stink, like I was a mafia girl in The Sopranos or something. But a girl from the bayou can't imitate the Meadowlands. Plus, my idea of a mean girl / Jersey persona meant I had to make fun of people or act judgy, like, oh my god, did you see what she was doing in the canteen? It's not nice to make fun of people, and I realized quickly that I wasn't a mean girl. Really, Gypsy? Because you befriended a huge mean girl on this app. Then I went through a goth phase and listened to heavy metal and wore black lipstick. That was brief too. Did the tomboy thing, which was only defined by my short hair at the time. I kept trying on different hats in different friend groups to see which one fit. Just like any adolescent is expected to do, except I was in my 20s. Okay. I tried to experiment with my sexuality too. I was pretty sure I was straight, but I tried anyway. Because of sexual abuse I had experienced and the way my mother made me feel dirty in my own womanly body, I had a mental block that prevented me from full satisfaction. I thought perhaps if I experimented with women, I would have a better chance of reaching climax. I think as a young girl, I was exposed to watching shows like Xena, Warrior Princess. Xena and Gabrielle were lesbians, and I watched it and didn't understand it. When I was around 16, I thought girls were pretty, and that confused me, so I thought, am I gay? There's a saying in prison, gay for the stage, straight from the gate. So when in Rome, I did kiss a couple girls and became a pillow princess 4 times. 4. That's when you receive instead of give. Nothing ever happened down there, so I figured I was straight. I'm sorry, but you tried 4 times? It wasn't like a 1 time, 2 time. You tried 4. Wow. I was trying to bloom and grow. Chillicothe was my greenhouse. Not exactly a natural habitat, but good enough to get the job done. In order to bloom, an old part of myself had to wither away. The guilt and shame that defined me had to be reconciled. The trial and error and experimenting with my persona and testing my interests helped me chisel away the old insecure self that had been a Frankenstein of my mother's making. The more I learned about what I wanted and needed, the more confident I became in who I was, what I was capable of doing, and the potential I had to go further. The more I learned about self-worth and forgiveness of myself and others, the more I began to trust my judgment of people. Trust that I could tell the difference between friends and foe. And we know you should not trust your judgment of people, because we know what kind of people you still hang around. Just saying. Growing up friendless, I had no idea what to expect of a friend or how to be one. Other than what I learned from actresses like Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez on Disney Channel shows, I didn't know there were different categories or levels of friendship, that acquaintances play a different role than friends, or what an inner circle was, or how to build one. I'm pretty sure the Disney Channel gave you a pretty accurate depiction of what friendships look like. Not as an adult, but definitely as like a teenager and stuff like that. And that's what she's talking about. She's talking about learning herself. So obviously, Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez, those were a pretty A1 point to try to figure it out, okay? Other than Aunt Rachel, my mother didn't model friendship for me with a group of Golden Girls or besties from high school. What is a true friend? What is a fake friend? I had no idea, but I really wanted one. There's another prison motto: you don't come to prison to make friends. How do you make friends in the friendless environment? You take a chance. In prison. That should be another motto. You don't take a chance. When I met Lori and Amelia, I realized that what a good friend was. Each of them had been my roommate at one time. Neither befriended me out of fascination with my infamy. It happened organically, a blossoming. Before I met Lori and Amelia, I felt like I was giving so much to my prison relationships, always listening and giving, and one day I realized I wasn't getting anything back from these people. But true friends, I now know, make you a better person. And Lori and Amelia did that, and then some. I found my tribe. Looks like she stole my thing. Just kidding. But it's funny because she says, but true friends, I know now, make you a better person. None of the friends she's had have made her a better person, because they haven't told her to take this accountability. They had her write this book. They could have said, hey, like, maybe you shouldn't write the book. You know what I mean? I don't know. Just my opinion. There's nothing more meaningful than knowing you found your people. Having a feeling of belonging changes a life. But first, you have to feel. Numbing myself with Suboxone was not the answer. For a million reasons, I needed to stop. The main reason I had turned to painkillers in the first place was to leave my world behind, now to heal. I needed to be present, not vacant. I was so afraid of the withdrawals. They were brutal back at county. Could I go through them again? Then I hit, as they say, my rock bottom. I lied to Christy and asked her for $40 because I told her I broke this girl's CD player and it needed cash to reimburse the girl. Christy trusted me and I hurt that trust. I used the money to buy drugs. I told Christy how sorry I was and that it wasn't right. I hurt that trust. She said, I forgive you. I love you all the same. Her forgiveness surprised me. It gave me the courage to quit cold turkey. I told myself that this time around, at least I knew what to expect. Facing my demons had to be done sober. Without the numbing, my life was beginning to change. I was beginning to feel like someone worthy of giving love and receiving it, who was even happy. I had found acceptance and love with trusted friends and family. My relationship with Dad and Christy had flourished through constant phone calls and frequent letter writing, and their own in-person visits where they'd bring me homemade food and pictures and tell me stories about my early life, memories that were never mine before. For every story my mother had told me about my dad, Christy, and my siblings, Dad had an alternate version. In the beginning, our visits together were like first dates. Again, putting your dad in that category of a relationship is wild. Wild. Until I felt comfortable enough to ask Dad and Christy questions about some of the moments of disappointment I remembered. Mike Stamfield was the one who first told me that my father had been sending money and letters and gifts for me all those years. I didn't believe him. I sent you cards for every occasion, Dad said. But she told me you didn't even know when my birthday was. I sent you a laptop one year, didn't you get it? But she told me we got that from charity. I left messages on your mama's voicemail wondering about you and wanting you to know if she got the money I sent for the operation. But she told me you didn't care about me, that you were all about having a son, and now that you got one, I was dead to you. Do you know how many times I called Dee Dee to try to plan trips with you? Christy said. I even wanted to take you for long holidays. But she told me that you were a bitch and Dad was beating you and you deserved it. She always thought we were cheating behind her back, and that wasn't true, Christy said. It's a little true, Christy. It's a little true. Dad and Christy wanted me. They loved me. You would think such news would elate me. Instead, I felt sadder than I ever had, like I was back in the shed, awakening from the dream I had of our happy life. Wow. So that's the end of chapter 18, guys. We're going to go to chapter 19. We're just not going to skip a beat because you know what? Because I need to upload this on YouTube. If you guys don't know, I do upload these on YouTube after we read. So I do have the chapters prior to this on my YouTube. So this is chapter 19, Amor, Amor. And I think this one was thrown in. I think this chapter was definitely thrown in. Just saying, because I don't think this is something that she would have, or she edited it before. So my public life really began when my family and I participated in the HBO documentary Mommy, Dead, and Dearest, which aired in May of 2017. An independent documentary filmmaker named Aaron Lee Carr contacted Dad, Christy, and Mike about doing a documentary about my childhood and interviewing me. There had been so much press coverage surrounding Nick and me, it felt good to have an opportunity to explain my side of the story. They began production as I was awaiting my court hearing before the plea deal. But I remember vividly that I was interviewed hours after I accepted the plea. In the process, I learned so much about what my dad and Christy had gone through too, and hearing from extended family members was enlightening. It helped me provide a context to see how far-reaching my mother's my mother's impact had been. Again, we're blaming your mom in a sense. You know what I mean? None of us expected the response. While yes, there were haters, the outpouring of support was shocking. People from all over the world sent me letters of encouragement, support, and of their own stories. My story opened a floodgate of other people's pain, and I think their hope that they too can survive. My heart broke as I read letters depicting graphic abuse, hopelessness, and shame. Family members of imprisoned loved ones wrote to my dad and Christy looking for connection in a club they did not choose to be in. One letter in particular stuck out to me. His voice leaped off the page as if it were sitting right in front of me. Holding the paper, I could feel his energy. He was a cool guy. Hi, my name is Ken. Ken? Funny. My mother never liked Barbie's Ken. Fuck it, I thought. I wrote him back. We wrote each other letters and started talking on the phone. He was easy to talk to and we had so much in common. He was from a big family with lots of siblings, which, having been brought up as an only child, appealed to me. I imagined their holiday gatherings being really loud and chaotic, and that brought on a smile. I couldn't wait for Ken to visit me. When he did, I was swept off my feet. Dang, he's handsome. After 37 minutes, he leaned over and gave me the most passionate kiss of my whole life. I didn't even know you liked me like that, I said, as the guard charged towards us. Yeah, I have for a while, he said. I have for a while, too. Poor Ken got kicked out for that kiss since the rule is no touching. I got lucky because that's an offense that can get you thrown in the hole. It was 100% worth it. The first time Ken told me he loved me felt like I had taken the most powerful opioid of all. Love was my new drug. She's admitting to this, guys. She's admitting love is her new drug, okay? She just went from one addiction to another addiction. Will you be my husband one day? I asked him on the phone after about a year of friendship and courtship. Of course, he said, and while I hadn't proposed his confirming that his plans for us. Of course, he said, and while I hadn't proposed, his confirming that his plan for us would one day be mutual had me walking on air. So she is saying she didn't propose to him, but she asked him, can you be my husband one day? And he said, of course. Not yes, but of course. Also, I want to caveat this. So they said that they were talking for a whole year. The documentary came out in 2017. That means they were talking from... The timeline just doesn't make sense if they were talking for a whole year, because she's saying she was reading all of these letters from the documentary that came out in 2017 and they started talking. The timelines she has are very put to where she's trying to manipulate you. There's not like a timeline of things because she doesn't even know the timeline of things. So keep that in mind, guys, okay? It's very convoluted. During an October visit about a year after the call, disregarding the rules, Ken held my hands close and told me how much I meant to him. I had a feeling a proposal was coming since he'd talked about our future together, but I never expected such beautiful words like the ones Ken spoke to me in the visitor's room. Gypsy, I know you through and through, and I love you for who you are today, for the heart I've come to know. Then Ken motioned his hands over his chest, over his heart, and continued, I want to spend every day waking up next to you, building a life with you, and being the one that you can come to through all the hard times. I want to be that one for you. Will you marry me? Yes. He couldn't propose with a ring because of prison restrictions on bringing offenders gifts. I did find a silver band for sale on the black market in prison. An inmate was getting a divorce and was selling her silver band, so I bought it. It was confiscated shortly after. Buying her own rings again. We kept our engagement private, only telling our closest family. Then the act aired on Hulu, and I went from being known to being a pseudo celebrity. My personal life was a carcass for vultures to feast on. The media, including true crime armchair enthusiasts, investigated everything about me, including Ken. The invasion was really hard on him. After an acquaintance of one of my family members leaked my relationship, clickbait articles appeared mockingly announcing our engagement. Ken was a private person and was bothered by the attention and scrutiny. The news of our engagement reached Nick, who sent me a letter in 2019, not too long after he got sentenced. Basically, Nick said I was committing adultery, that he had taken my virginity when he R-worded me, and that by God's law, we were married. The letter was reminiscent of his dominant role that he was obsessed with playing out when we had our internet relationship. His attempt to control me and humiliate me as his submissive for his own deviant and sexual pleasure had gotten old. Only because I was in a healthy relationship with Ken, who was my best friend, who made me feel special and appreciated, was I finally able to see how pathological Nick and I were when we were together. I wrote him one letter back, which acted as a closure letter. Co-defendants in the state of Missouri can communicate and even be housed together, but becoming pen pals, no pun intended, was never my intention. In the letter to Nick, I told him I didn't want to get back in a relationship with him, that I'd moved on. I covered everything I wanted him to know from A to Z, from getting arrested all the way to present, about how I felt. How we were basically children, adults with mindsets of children, going through this ordeal. I told him I realized he didn't have much outside experience, and I understand that. And I felt a sense of guilt, which is why I testified on his behalf in his trial. I felt that taking accountability for my role was the right thing to do. I didn't do it out of love, but out of sense of obligation and due diligence to justice. Anywho, I needed to make sure I was clear on that because I didn't want Nick to misconstrue my letter for wanting to be with him. I thought at first that it was Ken's discomfort with the popularity of the act and the widening of my reputation that led him to end our relationship. I was wrong. At the time of this writing, Ken has reached out to explain and set the record straight. We already know they were cheating on each other, but whatever. Could have just said that in your truth, you know? There were many adults in his life, presumably much wiser, wiser than he, who suggested it wasn't the right time for me to be married. If you love her, you'll set her free, was the common piece of advice he'd hear again and again, sometimes from prominent Hollywood therapists and other media personalities, sometimes from those in my own immediate family. I see now he believed he was acting in my best interest by sacrificing his own needs and wants. So there's this whole thing again about Ken. So Ken, at first she thought he left because of the whole thing with the act. And honestly, that is why he left. Because he couldn't take the heat. So he got out of the kitchen. But they've spun this with the Lifetime show that he left because people that were wiser in his life were telling him to let her go and that he shouldn't marry her. But what I believe is that people in his family didn't want him to marry her. They were like, you realize she's a convicted felon. You realize what she did. Like, hello. And then also she says, prominent Hollywood therapists and other media personalities. I would really love to know what therapists were messaging Ken, Hollywood therapists, and what media personalities actually messaged him, because I'm pretty sure nobody did, because nobody's ever said, hey, you know, we messaged Ken and we told him maybe he should step back and not date her. Most of this, if it is true, people telling him, is basically him or them being scared for him. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? The rite of passage of losing my first love happened alone in prison instead of in my bedroom, surrounded by girlfriends, playing me a breakup mix, and us eating pints of Ben and Jerry's, like in the movies. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's not ever like in the movies, Gypsy. It was a time when I missed my mom, a time that should have been shared between a mother and daughter, but never would be. Yeah, because you killed her. I thought about drugs. I thought about the smock. Instead, I cut off all my hair and made depression my new friend. My faith, along with the passing of time and lots of crying to Christy, revealed that God had a plan for me. Another blessing. He had seen the very same documentary on HBO that Ken had, but Ryan Anderson didn't write me until much later. Ryan came into my life during a time when I had hardened my heart. Rebound? Maybe. I couldn't see that then. He was very charming. His deep voice and familiar southern accent made me feel safe and special. Having grown up in Louisiana, Ryan felt like home to me because Ryan was also a proud Louisianian. We bantered about his favorite football team, the New Orleans Saints, and mine, the Kansas City Chiefs. I could learn to love the Saints, I'd say all flirty on the phone. I had lived in Louisiana and Missouri after all. But I didn't want to trust again. There was that choice once more. I was still stuck. My fear and feeling that I wasn't good enough were like brick walls that I couldn't bust through. Do I let Ryan in? Do I try this again and risk getting hurt? Ryan's sense of humor lifted my vibrations, and he laughed at my jokes too. Soon I was growing impatient for our next phone call. We had deep conversation about life, about pop culture, about our hopes for the future. He shared with me his fears, vulnerabilities, and his kryptonite. In return, I spilled every dark moment I had growing up. Ryan was the only person I had been able to finally open up to and not feel ashamed for my actions and past. We prayed together, we planned together. Some say he was my distraction, and he offered me something happy to look forward to day after day. Even though Ryan wasn't in prison, I think I was the same for him. Ryan and I fought too, like any old regular couple. I think those arguments made our relationship deeper and more serious. I showed my ugly side to Ryan, like that point in a new relationship when you fart or leave the bathroom door open. I worked out a lot of shit with him, tossing him my baggage. I'd feel bad after the fact about doing that. But then he'd toss me his baggage and I'd say, oh, okay, we're doing this. Ryan learned my triggers and I his. Once he told me, you're my heart, and my body felt like it was trapped in a room filling up with water, so I cussed him out. He didn't know my mother had said that to me constantly. So you just said that you poured out your guys' hearts, but he didn't know that your mom told you you're my heart. Make it make sense. It's inevitable that the things my mother did and said and how I was raised will affect certain decisions and behaviors moving forward. But I don't want them to. I want clarity on how I live and what I choose to carve out for myself and my future family. That will take work, but I'm a hard worker. I've been working on this ever since my release from prison. Ryan and I talked multiple times throughout the day and 4 hours before bed. This enabled us to fast track our relationship until we finally made our marriage commitment to each other. Many people, including my dad and Christy, told me not to marry Ryan. It was obvious. Ken had never left my heart. They at least wanted us to wait. But I see now that after a lifetime of being in love with the idea of being in love in my 30s, I felt this desperate need to find and create a family that I was once robbed of, complete with a Southern Prince Charming, even if it wasn't meant to be. In October of 2022, about 4 months after Ryan and I had our prison wedding, the weight of the responsibility of being someone's wife hit me hard. Self-doubt smearing my pledging self-worth and being Mrs. Anderson threw a wrench in my still developing identity. Friends and family were skeptical and concerned, so there were lots of cooks in the kitchen turning up the flame. But also I was afraid to be accountable to someone again. The relationship I had with my mother and with Nick required me to be bossed around. As a teacher, Ryan's natural demeanor was to take charge, and that personality trait seemed to rattle me, reminding me of how I was raised, alone and tired of crying over the largest argument Ryan and I had. I thought I could share my fear and confusion with some trusted friends writing. Hi friends, I just want to let you know I'm thinking about going forward with an annulment. I was hoping my friends would talk me off the ledge, tell me it was normal to feel this way, that the finality of being married sinks in for so many newlyweds, and that would be that. But they didn't. They knew we weren't supposed to be together. But like every other lesson I've learned in life, I'd have to figure that one out on my own. And with a little push from stepmommy Christy. Right? A little push from stepmommy Christy. I feel like, again, there's stuff that she's not saying. I honestly feel like she knew she had to find someone before she got out, because again, she still didn't trust Christy or Rod. As much as she said she did, I feel like she still really did not trust Christy or Rod. And she felt like she had nowhere to go once she left prison. And she felt like this is something that needed to happen. Even if she did serve her full time in prison, you know what I mean? So I feel like, honestly, it was something that she made herself do, in my opinion. I was seeing what they had in the back of this book. So it's so funny. It says about the authors, and we have Michelle Moore's picture on here, and Melissa Moore, sorry, and then Michelle Mastracini or whatever her name is. That's kind of weird, but anyways, yeah. So her time in prison, guys, I don't know. So that was chapters 17 and 18. That'll be available later today over on my YouTube. You guys can watch the remainder of them. I have all of the chapters up until now on my YouTube, so check it out. Okay, thank you guys. What I wanted to do was write in it and then send it back to Gypsy as kind of like a haha, you know, because I know she's not gonna read it, but I don't know. We'll see what happens when we're done reading it, because again, there's other things that I kind of want to go over with it. But I do have her audiobook that somebody sent to me too, so I'm going to be using her own voice because it makes it keeps her more accountable. Thank you.